This video will contain spoilers for the Dragon Ball Super Broly movie. Hello everyone, I'm Carthu and welcome back to the dojo. Today, we're discussing the tragedy of Paragus, how it plays out, what makes it a tragedy, and how it actually is one of the best written things in the Dragon Ball Super Broly movie, and definitely one of the best written characters overall. It's a beautiful character arc that really does emphasize the tragedy and actually takes some clear inspiration from the tragic hero archetype that we usually find in, say, Shakespeare's work or even Greek tragedies. But with that being said, guys, video intro. So to start off this video, I obviously know that you guys have at least seen the movie. I did put that big spoiler warning at the beginning, or at the very least know the plot, read plot summaries, listen to reviews, and so on and so forth. If you know all this information, you know what's about to go down, but let me give you the more in-depth look at it, the more literature side of it. I don't want to bog you down with literature stuff that you think Toriyama wasn't thinking of when he wrote this. That's fine, he may not have been and just subconsciously went to one of the most normal archetypes of any character in the world. That's perfectly fine. However, I will also talk about how it is a tragedy in its own right, ignoring the tragic hero archetype that I'm going to discuss first. But, like I said, we are discussing the tragic hero first. So the tragic hero archetype has 6 main steps, or you could say 6 main traits that establish yourself as a tragic hero. Now, obviously the one thing that Paragus is missing here is being the protagonist, but I would like to point out, at the beginning of the movie, when we see Paragus running into the throne room, being mad at King Vegeta for exiling his son, being rightfully mad, I might add, he is actually more so a protagonist figure in that conflict, as he is being confronted by King Vegeta, who is clearly an antagonistic force. He is, for all intents and purposes, the protagonist of that portion of the movie, though later on we may get rid of those feelings of him being heroic and noble and good. That is part of a tragic hero's journey, so it actually even makes more sense. But let's go into the traits. The first trait to discuss is Hamartia, or the tragic flaw that the character has that leads to his inevitable downfall. In this case, it's actually his love for his son. Now, tragic flaws tend to not be things that are inherently bad. They usually are good things, or at least from good means, because these characters are, in essence, heroes. And while a love for your son may be something that is noble and good and even rare among Saiyan men, as Gine says to Bardock later in the movie, we also know that this leads to the path that Paragus goes down. The love for his son, if he did not have it, if he had no love for his son, he would not be going down this path of tragedy. He would not end up in the fate that he had if he didn't follow this path. So let's move on to the next one, which is a bit more easy to grasp, and that's his hubris. And hubris is just excessive pride, and his excessive pride is basically in one thing, and that is his son. He is very proud of his son's power, and that's clear to see from the minute he starts talking about it. He is very proud to have a son who is an elite Saiyan warrior, one that even rivals and surpasses the prince's latent power. He's very, very proud of Broly. And that really is another key aspect of his inevitable downfall. The next thing we have is Paragus, which is the sudden reversal of a character's fortune. And this is clear when you know that Paragus was a colonel in the Saiyan army, and he seemed to be decently high-ranking. I mean, it didn't look like Bardock could just walk into the king's throne room. He was even in King Vegeta's throne room during the visitation from King Cold, where he enacts Frieza as their new ruler. It doesn't seem outlandish to say that he's a mid-class warrior, and that actually makes sense alongside his power level, which is like 4,000. So the reversal of this fortune does actually just come with Vampa. Being stranded on Vampa was the time that he inevitably loses everything. His life changes completely from something that is a fairly good life, something that you could survive with and deal with and do with, and he had for his entire life up to that point, to one that he's now barely scraping by, on a world with monsters that could kill him at any moment, and his reliance on his son to survive is all that he can rely on. The next trait is that of Anagnorisis. That is when a character makes an important discovery in the story, and you could use several moments for this, but I chose the one where he finds out his son is exiled, and that his son is stronger than Prince Vegeta. Both of these scenes do happen at the same time, as once he finds out his son was exiled, he realizes it's because his son's power surpasses that of Prince Vegeta's. This is truly an important discovery because it helps him with two things. One, the realization that he can train Broly to get his revenge on them for sending Broly away, and the realization that Broly is gone and he must chase after him. This important discovery in the plot is what actually leads to Paragus getting to Vampa, and thusly surviving the Saiyan extinction and being around for the Broly movie in general. Speaking of Vampa, that actually leads us directly into our next point, which is Nemesis, and that is his punishment. What happens to him, and this punishment is that because of his excessive pride and excessive love for his son, he inevitably gets stranded on Vampa. He makes a rash decision to land in the middle of a storm rather than to go land on the dry side of the planet, the side that would not have any issue with landing. If he had been more cautious about his situation, he wouldn't have been in the stranded state, the punishment that he had, but his mind was clouded with revenge and so on and so forth. And finally, we have catharsis. This is when we feel pity or fear as the audience for the inevitable downfall of our protag. And in this case, it would be the moments leading up to and including Paragus' death. We see the buildup. Frieza thinks to himself Broly's at his last strand, and Frieza just imagines what happened when Krillin was blown up on Namek and the Super Saiyan erupted out of Son Goku. And so he replicates it by killing Paragus. And with that, we've concluded the literature analysis side of this, where it's so in-depth, it's more like Shakespearean and Greek tragedies than anything else. But what about just a general tragedy? What is the general tragedy of Paragus in my view? And that simply comes down to his love for Broly eventually blinded him. Because he loved Broly so much, he sought revenge on Vegeta, King Vegeta III that is, for sending him away. He wanted his revenge so badly that he was willing to sacrifice his son to become a weapon to save his son. And there's some true irony there, that the only way he could conceivably come about and come to his revenge is by turning his son into not his son, but a weapon. But guess what happens when you create a weapon? Other people notice it. And Frieza had his eyes on Broly from the moment he saw him, and saw nothing of Paragus from that moment on. Frieza was always going to get rid of Paragus if Paragus was no longer useful. Paragus just happened to be useful by getting rid of him. And that is the tragedy of Paragus. He turned his son into a weapon, only for that weapon to be stolen and him to be used to make it stronger. But with that, guys, thank you very much for watching. Leave your opinions, counterpoints in the comments down below, hit subscribe and the notification bell if you want to stay up to date on the channel. Check out Patreon and the t-shirt if you really want to support me. But for now, video outro.